URC quarterfinals are here, and boy am I excited for them. My name is Mark, let's talk rugby. I have to say I'm really looking forward to these games. I enjoyed Champions Cup final and the Challenge Cup final before that, but the fact that we didn't have any URC teams involved meant I felt a little bit detached from it compared to, if we had at least one URC team in there that I could really cheer for. So now that we're back to the URC and we do have that attachment to all of these brilliant teams, it just got me so excited, to see these games, see the outcomes, see who's going to really put the hand up and say, we're the team to beat this year, because I think it's still a bit up in the air of who's actually the favourites to lift the title, etc. I think these quarterfinals are going to answer a lot of they're going to answer a lot of questions, not a lot of answers. Yeah, so what we're going to do, as usual, go down through each of the teams or each of the fixtures, talk about, recent form of each of the teams as well, and just make a prediction of who I think is going to win. So we're going to start with the first game, which is always a good place to start. So Friday, May 30th, it is a 7:35 kickoff. That's if you're in Ireland or the UK. I think it's 2 hours later, maybe, in South Africa. You definitely check your local time. Don't rely on me for that. But it's Glasgow Warriors versus DHL Stormers. So this is 4th on the log versus 5th on the log. It's at Scotstoun Stadium. You can catch it on Premier Sport or TG Car, and I'm sure there's other places you can find it. Places to watch as well if you're watching the UK or wherever. There should definitely be other places to watch. So let's talk about, first of all, the form of the teams coming in here. Let me pull it up as well. I've got it there. Okay, so Glasgow, not in brilliant form coming in, honestly. They've only won 3 of their last 7. They lost the last 3 on the bounce as well. That's not brilliant form, especially as defending champions coming in. The Stormers, they've won 6 of their last 7, so they're one of the form teams coming in. Definitely 4 wins on the bounce as well. And you have a feeling as well, if the regular season got on maybe another month or so another 3 or 4 rounds, these teams could actually have swapped in the table. Such has been Glasgow's kind of dip in form. And then, that would have been a whole different kettle of fish, Glasgow having to go down to South Africa, for a very tough quarterfinal. But they're not, they're at home, and that has to give them an edge. But let's have a look at, that run from them. So first of all, 1 point loss to Ospreys, then a decent run. They beat Munster by 3 points, they beat the Lions by 42, and then they beat Zebre by 8. But then the last 3 games, lost to the Bulls by 7, lost to Benetton by 26. That was an atrocious performance from them. 33 points to 7. They lost that one, and they were lucky to get 7, honestly. And then lost to Leinster by 8. Much improved in that one, got to say. I think in terms of performance compared to the way, where the teams had been relatively up to that point, I think Glasgow would be happier with the performance than Leinster would have in that game. Then the Stormers, their run, so beat the Bulls by 3, then they beat the Scarlets by 12, then a loss to Ulster by 4, then 4 on the bounce, beat Connacht by 5, Benetton by 51, Dragons by 36, and Cardiff by 10. So some really good performances and wins from them there as well. Having great momentum coming in here. And if you're going to win away in a quarterfinal, you need momentum coming in. You can't find it on the day or on the night. And, that's going to give Stormers confidence, at least, that they can go there and they have a chance to win at Scotstoun. And I think Stormers generally, when they get to playoffs as well, are a pretty confident team anyway. But Glasgow, they'll have the confidence from last year of having gone all the way and, having actually done it the hard way as well to get there. So the fact that they are like 4th seeds won't kind of, be something that they're going to overly worry about. I think obviously they would have rather have been second seeds because they were second in the table for so long, but they know that if they need to, if they win this, they go away in the semi-final. They can go away and perform. They went away and performed, semi-finals and final last year as well. So they know they've got that, in their locker to be able to pull out as well. And I think for them, we talked about it last year in the run up to the final, was that mental edge that was lacking for previous years, being in a Challenge Cup final and not performing there, and then playoffs as well, getting to the playoffs and not performing in the playoffs in previous years of this competition. But last year they kind of broke through that barrier, thinking they delivered. This year now they've got to show that they can do that again, and also I think dealing with the tag of favourites. At least in this game, definitely going to be favourites in this game at home. 4th seed versus 5th seed, defending champions as well. They've got to be labelled as the favourites, and they've got to handle that as well. Now, some things that will definitely help them is the fact that Hugh Jones and Sione Tuipulotu are back, like amazing centre pairing, and we saw against Leinster as well. Like Tuipulotu came off a half time to be protected for this game, but the guy caused Leinster all kind of problems in that first half as well. And then, the fact that the backline were doing well without those guys, you had the likes of Hastings, etc., Tom Jordan filling in while they were gone. But now that they're back, and who's it? Fraser McDowell as well, I think, there too. Was it him? I think so. But some talented players, but those two are kind of, irreplaceable for almost any team. They're at such a high level. And the fact that they've got them back and, the pack are starting to perform a little bit again, even though they did lose against Leinster, you can see again, compared to their semi-final in the Champions Cup, or their quarter-final, in the Champions Cup defeat, where they lost, was it 52-0? Completely night and day for them. So, having those players back, they got a run out against Leinster. They didn't get a win, but at least, they've got that in their legs now. But they now got to be able to perform in this game, and that's going to be the big ask for them. But these teams, they obviously have met each other once this year. So we'll have a quick look at, what happened in that game. So it was down in South Africa. It was at the Danny Craven Stadium, and it was DHL Stormers 17, Glasgow Warriors 28. So Glasgow actually went down there and won. It was Saturday, 26th of October in round 6. So it's a while ago, but still they have that again, in their minds that they went down there and they performed, and, they got 4 tries in the game as well, so they came away with a bonus point. Matthews, such an important player for them, I think, because again, in terms of their set piece has been a bit shaky lately, but with him, when he's there, the maul goes really well, and he has the ability, kind of Dan Sheehan-like, to be able to finish from the back of a maul and get over when maybe he shouldn't. So he's got that in his locker for them, and he did that in that game as well. Then Tuipulotu, Rowe and Venter also got tries, and then Hastings and Jordan scoring from the tee as well for them. So, some very good performances there. And, Stormers for their part, Willemse and Duplessis with the tries, then Lebock with points from the tee, and Lebock also went to the bin shortly before half time. So Stormers definitely going to have to, find something else compared to that. But you have to say, back in October, the Stormers, when that game happened, their form was, really poor. They were down there at they were well outside of the playoff place. I think maybe somewhere between 12th and 14th. They were kind of bouncing around at that stage, not really getting themselves together. But second half of the season, they've found that form, they put the run together, and now, it's, they say it all the time, like winning is a habit, and the Stormers are in the habit of winning now, and it's going to be the Glasgow now have to break the habit for them, and I think for Glasgow, what they need to do is they need a fast start. So, like, if we look at the game down in South Africa, actually there was no points up until about about 10 minutes before half time, I think, and then we had a try each before the break. Then most of the points came in the second half, but I feel like Glasgow, they've got to get some points on the board early, because the longer that Stormers feel like they're in with a shout, whether that's themselves scoring early or only being, maybe 3 points or 4 or 5 points behind, or wherever it happens to be, the longer the game goes on like that, they're really going to start believing. And again, the fact that they're coming in on the back of 4 wins, that habit of winning and getting over the line is going to really serve them there. So Glasgow have to kind of take that away from them. And the way that they have to do that, I feel at least, is that they've got to get out to a lead and then kind of trade scores with Stormers for the rest of the game, so that they keep them maybe 1 or 2 scores behind and not let the Stormers get into the lead, especially in that second half. Glasgow definitely have to perform in the second half. I think against Leinster, they were competitive first half, and then it fell away a bit in the second half. Obviously, part of that was the changes that they made, especially with Tuipulotu going off. But still, in this one, it's got to be an 80-minute performance. The defending champions, what we've seen, no champion in the URC has ever defended the title. I know it's only 3, like this is the 4th season, only 3 previous champions, but still, they'd love to be the first. But to do that, they've got to win this game, and it's going to be a really tough one. But I do feel that Glasgow are going to have just enough, because of the players who come back in now, with them available. I think it's going to feel to them like, almost getting new players into the team. And I think they're going to get a boost from that. And I think that's going to tell in the performance. So I'm going to go for a Glasgow win. But the Stormers, again, any kind of sniff, and they're a team that can absolutely win. And of the 4 fixtures here this weekend, I wouldn't, there's 2 teams I really wouldn't be surprised if they won away. And the Stormers are definitely one of those 2, and actually top of the list, I would say. But I'm going to go for Glasgow win. Okay, so on to the next game. And the next game is a Saturday game. It's a 12:30 kickoff, Ireland and UK time. And it is the Vodacom Bulls versus Edinburgh. So this is 2nd versus 7th. It's Loftus Versfeld. And you can catch this one on Premier Sport. And again, I'm sure there are other places where you can catch it as well. So this is an interesting one, because Edinburgh, last year missed out on the playoffs, and they did enough this year to get themselves in. So you wonder with them, is there going to be that kind of thing of, okay, we qualified for the Champions Cup, we've got into the playoffs, and then there's a little bit almost of a relaxation, and then not being able to get up to the height to get themselves, be competitive in this game. That's going to be an interesting one, because, we saw Edinburgh this year, with mixed performances, let's say, down in South Africa, they got absolutely trashed. It was by the Lions, right? The halftime score for the Lions was crazy. And Edinburgh put on a little bit in the second half, but, not brilliant. But we'll talk about the one against the Bulls, but certainly more competitive against the Bulls. But let's look at the form first of all, and then we'll talk about that game. So first of all, the Bulls, we talked about the Stormers being a form team coming in. The Bulls are probably the form team coming in. Like the Stormers, they've won 6 of the last 7, but they've won 6 on the bounce. So you can't get, you could get it was 7, but no one else. This is the best record of anyone coming in terms of sequence of wins. And then Edinburgh, a bit, up and down as their season has been as well. So, they have 4 wins, a draw, and then 2 losses in their sequence. So let's look at the Bulls sequence first. Start off with a 3-point loss to the Stormers. But then after that, it's all wins. They beat Leinster by a point. They beat Zebre by 39, Munster by 3, Glasgow by 7, Cardiff by 24, and then ended off with a 40-point win against the Dragons. I'm fairly comfortable in that last one. But talked about it before, the Bulls are masters at hitting form right around this time of the season. The only thing they haven't achieved is actually lifting the trophy. But, they've gotten to 2 finals previously. So, they've been knocking on the door. They've been people talk about Leinster not winning the title, but the Bulls of the teams who haven't lifted the title yet, the Bulls have come the closest of any of the teams who haven't lifted the title. So brilliant form for them coming in. Edinburgh then, their sequence. So win against Munster, then they lose against Benetton. They beat the Dragons by 33, lose against the Sharks by 1. Then they draw against Zebre, and then they kind of bounce back a bit, win away to Connacht, and then they beat Ulster pretty handily in the last game by 30 points, and that qualified them for these playoffs. So let's have a look at what happened when these 2 teams met earlier on in the season. So it was Vodacom Bulls 22, Edinburgh 16. This was at Loftus Versfeld, so the same venue as the game on Saturday, and this was on the 28th of September, so way back in round 2. So again, is it too far back for it to really count in terms of form or these 2 teams going head to head? But still, it's the most recent meeting between the teams in this competition. So the Bulls in that game got 3 tries. So you had Kirsten, Van der Vault, and Moody, and then you had Ashman scoring for Edinburgh. Now, these 2 teams also did play in the, what was it? Was it round of 16 or the quarter? Yeah, round of 16 or the quarter final of the Challenge Cup, and Edinburgh performed well in that one. They won that one. But have to say, in terms of the Bulls team that went there, it wasn't the strongest team, and you had the likes of Moody actually coming off the bench and having a good impact and inspiring the Bulls to kind of come back a little bit. But still, Edinburgh will have that kind of recent win over the Bulls in their mind. And again, it doesn't always matter that personnel have changed. It's just the fact that there's going to be that confidence there of they've at least played some of these players that are going to be playing for the Bulls in that game, and they feel like, yeah, we got it better than them there, we can do it again. And that's what they're going to need going into this. But Ashman was the only try scorer for Edinburgh in there. And then in terms of off the tee, you had Van der Vault and Chamberlain for the Bulls, and then you had Thompson scoring points from the boot for Edinburgh. There were 3 yellow cards in this game as well. You had Hanacom going to the bin the first half, then Matanzima in the second half, and then Ashman in about the last 10 minutes, I think, went to the bin for Edinburgh. But despite that, the Bulls still had enough to win, and Thompson actually put over a penalty about 5 minutes to go to get Edinburgh a losing bonus point in that one. But still, the fact that they went there and they came close, at least, should be some comfort to Edinburgh coming into this. But again, Bulls, they've been in terms of, again, teams who haven't won the title, they've been the most consistent in the playoffs. They've reached 2 finals, and they came close on both occasions as well. It's not like they got hockeyed in either of the finals they were in. So they've got to be feeling hugely confident about this game. Edinburgh, we talked about it before with regards to Edinburgh and Connacht as well, the two most inconsistent teams in the league, and that's what you got to worry about is, can they back up that win against Ulster now with a performance in this game, and not just a performance, get a win as well. And that's the worry, right, is, Edinburgh, will they just be satisfied with having qualified for the Champions Cup and being in the playoffs? Now, I'm not saying saying they're satisfied doesn't mean that they're not going there to try and win. They obviously are, but there's, I'm wondering in terms of the hunger between these teams. I would say that the Bulls have more hunger for a win in this game, because you feel like they're on a mission to win, to lift this trophy. And, it's kind of a bit of a quest for them. If you think, Irish fans think back to maybe Munster in the hunt for the Heineken Cup, all those years ago. That's the kind of feeling I get about the Bulls, their fans, the players, the coaches, the whole organisation is, they really are out to lift the trophy, to win this competition. And, from Edinburgh, I don't feel like they're in the same boat at the minute. I think, again, Edinburgh, they're a team that could have been in the playoffs or not, and the same happened last year where they missed out on the last day. And, again, teams once you're in the playoffs, you want to win the title, you want to lift the title, but there's a difference, I think, between a team like the Bulls, who have that absolute ambition of not just, we want to win this game, it's we want to get back to that final and we want to finally lift that trophy. Whereas Edinburgh, I think they're going to be more take each game as it comes. If they go down here and they win, brilliant, they're into a semi-final, then let's think about the semi-final, right? But for this game, I think if they go down and they perform, you're not going to be happy that you lost, but I think it's just going to show that there has been some, a step forward has been taken with Edinburgh this year. I think that's what they need, really. Obviously, again, a win would be amazing, but if they can go down and put in a performance, that, to me, that is kind of a win for Edinburgh, is that there's something there that next year, then in Champions Cup, then in the URC as well, can they then take another step forward? And another step forward for them would be being in kind of the top 6 of the URC for most of the season, getting out of their pool in the Champions Cup as well. That they're the kind of the two big challenges for them next year, I think. And yeah, I think this year, having got this far, again, be delighted with a win, but I think that, a performance in this is probably what they're honestly going to be after. And probably, hopefully, what they're going to get, because I want all these games to be competitive and be exciting. But I'm going to go for Vodacom Bulls win in that one. Okay, on to the next game then, and it is on Saturday, May 31st as well. This one is a 3 o'clock kickoff, and it is Leinster versus Scarlets. So this is 1st versus 8th. It's at the Aviva Stadium. Catch it on Premier Sports and on RTE if you're watching in Ireland. And, this is an interesting one, because these two teams are the ones who have actually played each other most recently. We'll talk about that in a minute. And actually, the fact that Leinster's form has fallen off a cliff as well. If you'd looked at this maybe, 2 months ago, let's say, as this is the fixture Leinster are going to have in the quarterfinal, even as Scarlets fans, I think even the most diehard Scarlet fans would be predicting a Leinster win in it. Now, Leinster's definitely still the favourites, but a few more people are going to be picking Scarlets, and Scarlets fans are going to feel like they definitely have a chance. Whereas before, you feel like maybe they you've always got that thing as being an underdog of, there's the hope of winning, and feeling you have a chance. But then there's the genuine, we actually have a chance here. I think that's the difference for Scarlets, I think, in this one. But let's have a look at the form, and then we'll talk about the recent meeting as well. So Leinster coming in 5 of 7 which for them is their worst run in the season. They've lost 2 games all season. They've won 16, and the 2 games they've lost have been in the last 7. So that's their worst sequence coming in. Scarlets, they've won 4 of the last 7, and that's probably their best sequence of the season. They've only won 9 games this year, so the fact that 4 of them came in the last 5 rounds as well. So brilliant run from Scarlets to get themselves into the playoffs. And something that I'll talk about now, because otherwise I'll forget it, but it's amazing to think that at the start of the season that there were some kind of murmurings, people saying, is Dwayne Peele the right man for the job? And I mentioned, if you go back to the videos from then, when I covered Scarlet's games or covered the roundups or whatever, you can see even back then I was incredulous about that. I felt that there was something there for Scarlets, and that they were definitely a much improved team than they were last year, where I felt last year they were very kind of, very easy to beat because they didn't stick in games. And, they would produce some brilliant rugby, score brilliant tries, but then pack wouldn't stand up and they get absolutely decimated, So they'd be scoring a couple of tries, but losing by 20, 30 points or whatever in games, Whereas this year you could see they were sticking in games, they gave themselves a chance to win them, whereas last year it wasn't happening, and then the wins started to come as well. So the fact that I did say they've only won 9 games this year, but that's a big improvement on previous years, and to win half of their games as well, and then they got a draw on there too. So they actually have a winning record this year over the season in URC. So absolutely brilliant from them and great improvement. But let's have a look at the sequences, and then we'll talk a little bit more about when the teams met last. So Leinster, their sequence starts with a win against Cardiff by 18 points. Then they lost to the Bulls by 1 point. Then that win against the Sharks, the famous, who was it, Deegan, right? Diving into whatever it was, 1 meter swim pool or something, and almost breaking his neck. Then beat Ulster by 24. They lost against the Scarlets by 13. Then they won against Zebre by 71. And then they beat Glasgow by 8 last time out. So Scarlets, their run, lost against Ulster by 2, lost against the Stormers by 12, then wins against the Osprey by 16, Dragons by 8, Leinster by 13, and then the Lions by 13. And then they lost in the final game against the Sharks by 9 points. And I talked about that in the preview, was that the fact that they would know whether they were through to the playoffs or not before they played, because the only game after that Scarlets game was the Leinster against Glasgow game, which had no effect on the Scarlets qualifying or not. So they knew they qualified beforehand. But it still took the Sharks a while to kind of pull away and get a win. It was a very low scoring game as well, that one. So, they went down there and they did well. And again, just showing that grit that they have about them this year that was missing. And they're going to need that against Leinster as well, to stay in the game and frustrate Leinster and do what kind of they did in that game where they beat them a few rounds ago as well. So let's actually talk about that game now. So the scoreline was Scarlets 35, Leinster 22. It was at the Parky Scarlets. It was on 26th of April, round 16. So easily the most recent game between any of the quarterfinalists or any of the matchups in the quarterfinals, and the only one that's actually happened this year. And it happened only a few weeks ago as well. So Scarlets, they got a bonus point win in that one. They got tries from Davies, Rogers, Plumtree, and Roberts, and some really good tries there as well. Really well worked. They cut Leinster open a few times as well. Leinster responding with tries from Osborne, Mangan, and Culhane. And Leinster kind of around at the time that Culhane scored, it felt like maybe there was a potential of a comeback from them. And then I thought Scarlets did very well to kind of stifle that and then go on. And I think they added a couple of penalties from Johan Lloyd later on in the game, the last kind of 25 minutes, I think one of the last minute as well, just to stretch that lead out and make sure Leinster didn't get anything out of the game. I thought it was a really well controlled performance from them. And again, a big step up from what we've seen from them in the URC up to this season. And, yes, Leinster, a much changed team, but you can only beat what's there. And, although it's a much changed team, you had the likes of Osborne in there. You had Ross Byrne there, who was Leinster starting 10 until this season. So, there weren't huge drop-offs with those players. Just brilliant performance from Scarlets. And I thought they really, picked holes in that Leinster defence as well. They're going to have to do the same again in this one. In that one as well, they got fast start. I think Davis got over in the first 10 minutes for his try. And then Rogers got the second try around about the 20-minute mark. And then they had 3 tries before half time. They're going to have to pull off something similar, I think, in this one as well. It's going to have to be a fast start. They have their own performance against Leinster to kind of use as a bit of a template, but also that performance by Northampton against, the first team of Leinster, the way, very similar, honestly, exploiting space on the wings, tempting that rush defense to come up and then being having the skill to get the passes on the outside where the space is. And then when you get in behind, finishing your chances and, frustrating Leinster as well, make them chase the game and, disrupt their set piece, make the breakdown a mess. That's all the kind of things that they've got to do. And they've shown they can do it. It's now whether they can do it, in the Viva against, Leinster's first team. So, as I said, when we talked about this initially, go back a month or two and, well, more than a month, because like the 26th of April is more than a month ago, right? But go back like 6 weeks or 2 months, and if you said this is going to be the fixture for the quarterfinal, pretty much everyone say, yeah, Leinster are going to win that easy. It's going to be just a warm-up game for them. And I'd be probably worried about whether Leinster would get enough of enough of a workout in the game, and then not be kind of underdone for a semi-final or whatever, right? Other than the most arrogant Leinster fan, and sadly, well, there's a sad part and a good part, I think. Sadly, any team, there's always arrogant fans, and Leinster are no different, right? There will be arrogant Leinster fans who are saying, the Scarlets, we'll hockey them. We could play them with 13 players and we'd still trash them or whatever, right? But the lucky part is that's, I think, in any fan base, and the same applies to Leinster, that's a small, although vocal part of the fan base, and it doesn't help, I think, with Leinster or with Ireland and Ireland teams as well, is that you have vocal parts of the media who are kind of similar to that. They have an arrogance on behalf of the team, even if they're not from Leinster or wherever. They'll still have that kind of arrogance about them. But I think going into this team or this game, if you're a proper serious Leinster fan, the Scarlets are going to be a tough opposition. That Leinster have not looked very good at all recently. Champions Cup, semi-final, they really, really poor performance from them. Then this game against Scarlets, even though it was a changed team, not a great performance. And then that performance against Glasgow as well looked like almost a pre-season game. or like an early season game for Leinster where things not firing, etc. So they've had 2 weeks now to fix it. And the problem with Leinster is that in recent years, those players being in camp has been the problem, right? That they haven't been out playing games, and they've come in and they haven't performed. So, that's a bit of a worry, if I'm honest, on that score. But you feel like, it's going to be a test of the mettle of this Leinster team in terms of, where's the desire in those players now? Was this year all about getting that Champions Cup? They brought in Snyman, Barrett and Slimani to win, or they thought to win the Champions Cup, to give them a better chance of winning the Champions Cup, right? Is it now the URC just going to be a consolation prize if they get it? And if they're thinking that already, I think if they're thinking that already, they're not getting to a final, honestly, because you can't go out with that mindset and work your way through playoffs in such a competitive league. Doesn't matter how far Leinster were ahead in the normal table, because we've seen it year after year after year. If they come into the knockout stages and they're not treating it with the respect it deserves, they're going to get knocked out. And for me as a Leinster fan, if that happens, absolutely deserve it as well. But is the desire there in that team? We have to see that. As a Leinster fan, I'm actually doubting that from these guys. I want them to show that. I want them to show the fight. I want them to show the desire. Also, I want to see leadership from the team. That decision to go to the corner against Northampton, absolutely criminal. The fact that, people are saying afterwards now, oh, well, because it happens a lot now, coaches will send a tee on so that you can't kick to the corner, right? So people are saying the coaches should have sent a tee on, and they shouldn't have left it up to the players on the field, which, if in fairness, you can see, I can see that as a good argument, and that maybe the coaches should have taken it out of the hands of the players, but it doesn't change the fact that the leadership on field, wasn't good enough in that game. And it doesn't just include decisions whether you go for the post or the corner. It's all, for me, it's about getting the players all on the same sheet when you're behind, when your back's against the wall, and being able to kind of lead that team through. And I feel like this Leinster team, the leadership wasn't there in that game. And that's what I'm worried about as well in the playoffs here is the leadership on field going to be there when their backs are against the wall, when they're in the trenches? Can they actually do it? Can they pull it off? Because again, a part of the problem I see with this Leinster team since the URC has come about is hardly any of these players, other than the young players who've come in recent years, so the likes of Prendergast, the likes of Frawley, Osborne, etc., and then O'Brien as well. Many of the senior players who've been there and done that and been in the Ireland team for a long time, they've never gone to South Africa to play a game for Leinster. And for me, that's a big oversight, because you want your best players to be tested, and South Africa go down there. That's the biggest test they're going to get, and that's where you're going to find their true mettle for you as a team. And I think if Leinster had been doing that when they got in trouble in Champions Cup finals or semi-finals or whatever in recent years, maybe those players, the likes of your the likes of your Ringrose or Henshaw, or your Gibson Parks, your Lowe's, and most of the pack, the likes of Porter, Sheehan, etc. They haven't been down there. Some of them have maybe one game down there, but for the most part, again, not. And yet they've got to fix that. And for me, the only way they're going to fix that is by sending stronger teams to South Africa. So that's a long-term thing. But for now, the question is, those players, we've seen them perform previously for Ireland, can they do it in Leinster shirt is the thing, right? And also, if this Leinster team are losing in this game, then most of those players don't have like a deep well of experience of, losing games for Leinster and coming back and getting the win. They're so used to, their kind of general sequence in the game is generally get a fast start, right? Get a try maybe in the first 10 minutes or so. Then maybe get a second try, around about the 20-minute mark, or it's a tight game, but soak up pressure from the opposition. Don't let the opposition cross the line. Then score themselves just before half time. Score again just after half time. Then in that kind of 10-minute period between like 45 and 55 minutes, tack on another 2 or 3 tries. The game is gone. And in the last 20 minutes, then they relax a little bit and they concede points. Normally, Leinster concede a lot of points in the last 20 minutes of games compared to how much they concede in the rest of the game. But at that stage, the game's already done. And that's kind of the general thing for these players. So can they lift themselves and perform, if they're behind in this one? For me, I think they need that fast start. They need to get into that lead. It won't be a worry if Scarlets score first, because we've seen Leinster concede first and then they can score within maybe like 5 or 10 minutes of conceding. That's not a worry. It's if they're like 2 or 3 scores behind coming towards half time. That's when they start to get a little bit shaky, a little bit rocky. And then if they're losing going into the last 20 minutes, it's been very hard for them to actually come over the top of teams in the last quarter. But having said all that, again, I'm hoping for a performance from Scarlets. Even as a Leinster fan, that's why I've got the shirt on them. I don't want to see quarterfinals being one-sided affairs anyway. So I want to see an exciting game, but I obviously want to see a Leinster win, and that's what I'm backing. I'm backing a Leinster win, but I'm backing Scarlets to make them absolutely work for it as well. Okay, so on to then the final game of the final quarterfinal, and that is Saturday again. It's a 5:30 kickoff. It is Hollywoodbets Sharks versus Munster. This is a 3rd versus 6th, and it's the Hollywoodbets Kings Park. You can catch it on Premier Sport and TG Car if you're watching from Ireland. Okay, so these two, interesting matchup, honestly. You've got the Sharks, who last year they put all their focus on winning the Challenge Cup, and they did that. And the URC went bye to bye. They were down there, towards the bottom of the league all the way through. I think maybe they finished in 13th after winning the last game of the season or something like that. But yeah, very poor URC season for the last year. Munster, champions from 2 years ago, weren't great in the knockout stages to defend the title. Last year, then this year, they've been up and down a little bit. Made a little bit of progress in terms of Champions Cup performances, but still, I feel like their back line is still a way off where they were 2 seasons ago when they won, and that's really what they've got to sort out. I think also, the last game, they seem to have fixed their line-out, but their line-out has been an issue for a long time. So can the Sharks, with the likes of like Etzebeth or whoever who is going to be playing in this one, make a mess of their line out too. So that's going to be, I think, an interesting one there as well. Then, we look at the form of these two teams coming in. So let me pull it up here. So Sharks, they've won 6 of the last 7. So you look at each of the South African teams coming in, all of them won 6 out of 7. And again, South African teams seem to have, better than any other of the nations in this competition, gotten the hang of coming into form at the right time. So, and then Munster have won their 3 of the last 7. So Munster were doing well, then they fell away a bit, and then they came back in the last couple of rounds. So the Sharks in their sequence, they started with a win against the Lions, then they beat Zebre, then they lost to Leinster, and that was a home. That was at Deegan jumping into pool one. Then they beat Edinburgh, they beat Ulster, they beat Ospreys, and then they beat Scarlets. But a lot of the the wins there have been by less than 10 points as well. So Munster could be in the game for a lot of the game. It was kind of similar. Then Munster sequence, lost against Edinburgh and then Glasgow. Then they had a win against Connacht, lost against the Bulls, lost against Cardiff. Then they beat Ulster and finally then beat Benetton in that kind of winner takes all shootout between them for a spot in these playoffs. So Sharks definitely in the better form of the two teams. Munster, they're starting to look decent, but it's whether that kind of progress has come a little bit too late in the season, I think, for them. But let's have a look at what happened between the teams when they last played. So it was 41 points to 24 to the Sharks. It was at Hollywoodbets Kings Park. So same venue as before. It was back in October, 26th of October in round 6. So again, maybe back a bit, and both teams have progressed maybe from there, but I think the Sharks have certainly come on more compared to the way both teams were back then. But very fast start for the Sharks, like Fassi over in the first opening seconds of the game, then Mapimpi over like 2 tries after 4 minutes, then Ahern back for Munster, then Williams over for the Sharks, then Haley gets in for Munster, and then Esterhazen, who I think is absolutely amazing player, he was in before half time. So Sharks bonus point before the break. Then second half they had Chituka with another try for them, and late on Munster get a try bonus point because Nash and Tyg Byrne in the very last minute got over for a try for them. And then back then they had Burns at 10 as well, so you'd imagine that it's going to be Crowley this time. But Hendricks was in very good form from the tee for the Sharks in that game, and even though they they won the game fairly comfortably, and Munster basically put a bit of gloss really on from their side towards the end. But Sharks had Venter in the bin as well in the second half too. So based on that, you've got to say Sharks definitely the favourites for this. But you look at all the fixtures, you think the home team definitely the favourites in each of the games. But you look at the team that the Sharks have. And again, I talked about it before, where they're one of those teams where you feel they're kind of almost less than the sum of their parts, right? That they're an absolutely amazing team, but at the same time, performance wise, you wonder sometimes why they don't perform up to the level that you would expect them to. Because you look at the players in their squad, like you got the likes of Buthelezi, Etzebeth. Etzebeth, I don't know whether is he injured or I'm not sure actually, but even beyond him though, you got the likes of I really like Grobler as a player. Then you got like Jacobs, you got Koch, You got Jason Jenkins there that, Munster and Ireland fans would know very well as well. Sia Khaleesi, like an absolutely amazing player. Mbata, you've got Mbanambi, Oxenche, Makunu, Nyakane, just Chituka, both Chitukas actually. You got Vincent and Manu are there now as well. You got Venter, Van Herden, looking at those like Portiger just in the pack, like that's an amazing pack of players. So many Springboks in there. And then, in the backs as well, you got to like Kronya, Esther Hazen, who is brilliant, Fassi, Furi, someone who are really like, especially like this season, Ethan Hooker. Ethan Hooker is the kind of player where you can just tell him, you're playing in the centres, you're playing the wing, you're playing full back. Doesn't matter. The guy's going to do a stellar job for you. Then you got both Hendrickses in there as well. Julius, big impact off the bench. Mapimpi, Masuku. I can never pronounce this guy's name, but it's like Penske or something. Penxe. I always get his name wrong though, when I pronounce it. But then Grant Williams, like brilliant pace on him as well. Franco Venter, just so many brilliant players in their team. And you would look at it, basing themselves on Leinster. You look at those two teams, and if you were just looking at the players, you would think, those two teams really should be swapping the title every year, with the odd team winning it again. But that's the great thing about rugby, the great thing about the URC. It's not about your players, it's about your team. And if your players, can't perform together properly as a team, especially in the big games, then there's chances for other teams who maybe, like pound for pound, don't have as good players, but they do have still some stellar players, but also bring in other, players who are kind of more kind of club players, you might call them, but still as a team, they just work better. And that's what's happening in the URC. And it's one of the brilliant things about it as well, I think. But looking at this, you can see the Sharks this year have said, we want to do well in the URC. They kind of threw their European campaign, which is a little bit sad, honestly, because I was hoping to see the Sharks perform well in Europe. I'm not saying they didn't try. I'm just saying that they tried up to the point where they knew progress wasn't going to happen, and then they stopped trying. And it's very clear, in terms of the squads they sent for certain games, etc. And, for me, I've talked about it before. I think, South African teams get a bit of a raw deal in terms of the travel and stuff for the Champions Cup. Yes, other teams have to travel to South Africa as well, but whatever is happening with the South African teams, they're like on 2-3 flights, going here, there, and everywhere, and for me, it's really is weird. Like, why doesn't the URC or just the South African teams in the URC have a dedicated airline like Emirates support or sponsor the lines? Like, why aren't they like the official carrier, let's say, of the URC? And as part of that deal, then you get decent flights for teams either flying to South Africa or from South Africa, to play games or wherever. For me, it just doesn't make sense, and something has to be done to make it a bit fairer for the South African teams as well in for stuff like that. But last year, with all of that against them, they still won the Challenge Cup. So, if they put their mind to it, they can do it. And again, with the URC, you think, if they put their mind to it, they can lift that trophy as well. So is it going to be 2 trophies on the bounce for the Sharks? Munster, they have won this title previously, but I don't think this team is as good as the team that won it, honestly. I think some players certainly have points to prove. I think that the likes of Casey and Crowley certainly at halfbacks there. I think you got Gavin Coombs in there as well. Most actually the whole of that back row probably have a point to prove as well in this game. And I think in terms of when you look at the drop off in performance of the Leinster players, a lot of those Munster players will be thinking that, if we can perform, there are spots in the Irish team as well to be won on the back of decent performance in these knockout stages, and then potentially on the Irish tour as well in the summer. But still, I feel like I talked about at the top that there were two teams that I felt that would feel that there were genuine chances of winning away. I think Munster are the second team. I think definitely Stormers are number one on that list, but Munster are the second team, and it's gonna have to be almost perfect 80 minutes from them. I'm not saying they can't do that. We've seen them do that before. Crowley's got to be absolutely on it. Casey has to kind of walk that line that he does between keeping the pace up and being like that little annoying. He's always starting trouble, isn't he? But having that edge to him, but not going too far with it. Not giving away stupid penalties and compounding errors and stuff like that. So they got to be perfect. Whereas I think the Sharks need to play at about maybe 80-90% of what they can, and they should win the game, honestly. But we've seen the Sharks team, not even hitting 50% of what the players in the team should be hitting. So there's definitely a chance there for Munster. But having said that, my plug on this one, I'm gonna be cheering for Munster, but I'm gonna go for a Sharks win. So I'm basically backing all the home teams, which is kind of boring. But I've got to go with what I really feel in terms of who I think is going to win the game, not who I want to win particular games. But that is a look ahead to the quarterfinals. We will have reviews of every single game as well over the weekend. We'll have a wrap up, probably on, it might be Sunday. I might make time for Sunday. It might be Monday though, because Monday is a bank holiday. So I'll actually have time rather than being at work on Monday as well. So maybe Monday is a better bet for that. But there definitely will be a wrap up. I promised a wrap up for Europe. It didn't happen because work was too busy. But I'll be off on Monday. So there's no excuses from that point of view, at least, for not getting it done. So we'll do that. And then from there, then we'll know who's in the semi-final, and, we can get excited again, over the semi-finals. And, it's kind of weird. Like I predicted all the home teams winning, right? But, you look at any of those, away teams in the quarterfinals, and if any one of them win, it's going to make the semi-final lineup even more exciting, because then you've got a team who have done it away from home and have that belief going in to probably an away semi-final as well, and that would just be amazing, I think, in terms of the context of it. So I'm predicting all home wins, but I'm hoping for some away wins in this. So let me know what you think down in the comments.